Hello YouTube, welcome back to my Hinsug channel. Today I have an extra valuable and interesting one for you today, especially for all the people that are trying to get to the bottom of what is the deal with schizotypal personality disorder, which I like to pronounce schizotypal. And it really is a lot of fun to kind of explore different pools of symptoms and your own personality traits and finding reference points for the different disorders, because there's always different presentations and levels of severity. And it's fun being part of that. And up until this point, I've been kind of unofficially diagnosed, which you might say, does that mean you've been self-diagnosed this whole time? Isn't that reckless, irresponsible? And I say unofficial because I've had multiple mental health professionals in my life, including a therapist who would have liked to confirmed all this for me officially, but it takes a PhD psychologist who's trained to do psychological evaluations to get a diagnosis for this stuff. And I finally got to that point. I am properly diagnosed, and I'm going to give you my full kind of diagnostic readout here. But I want to note on how funny part of this is, considering the history of my channel. My channel started out as just this fun way I wanted to explain away autism spectrum disorder using personality traits and, from things like the Big Five and Myers-Briggs, because I really feel like you can, some of them really seem like just another way to look at personality traits that don't necessarily have to represent a disorder, which is an angle I'll probably continue trying out. But I can finally put a stamp on myself as a good reference point for some of these things. So without further ado, here is my diagnosis. What is this person, this humanoid character, Hinsug, who's got this questionable impression of his approximation of humanity? I will tell you. I am diagnosed, and this probably isn't visible, but I do indeed have autism spectrum disorder without intellectual impairment, with language impairment, level 1, bipolar II disorder. I'll get into that a little bit. And I am indeed schizotypal personality disorder, which I like to pronounce schizotypal. And I have ADHD, predominantly inattentive type. Boom. It's so funny in a way, because it is exciting. It's like, which is funny, right? Because it's like, hey, congratulations there, Hinsug. You have a personality disorder. That's just this. But it is fun. It's nice to know and to be pointed in the right direction. So we have an interesting opportunity here, because here's the thing: autism spectrum disorder and schizotypal personality disorder overlap a lot. In fact, they overlap so much, despite being different disorders, that you could argue that you should kind of pick one. But I met the criteria for both, and I'm diagnosed with both. So the opportunity we have here is just kind of parsing them out. Especially since I think actually there's more people who are interested in identifying with me as autism spectrum disorder. So I've been thinking about this, and there's a lot of things I can say, express myself and my conception of myself, and it's sort of a fun way to explore the disorders, because it's not clear sometimes which statement fits in which bucket. And I'll show you what I mean. So here's something you might hear me say. I'm a weird loner. I'm a weird loner who struggles to even pretend to be normal, and I am apprehensive about humanity. Interesting statement, but who am I representing there? Am I representing autism or schizotypal there? And for some of this, I think it's actually both. And there's something I wanted to get. I really want to get into the kind of the loner tendencies, the kind of the loner aspects of this, and a little deeper. Somebody's very interested in that. Here's another statement. I have difficulty trusting others and have intrusive thoughts very often. I'd argue this one is this one's in the schizotypal bucket, but I can't imagine that many autism spectrum disorder folks not also identifying with that. In fact, I want to dwell on those two words, intrusive thoughts. If you ask me, I don't think those two words, intrusive thoughts, I can't even imagine anything more relatable to that. Intrusive thoughts feels like almost like a way to just like to define my brain, you know, like there's nothing more relatable than those two words, intrusive thoughts. Here's another statement. I am worried about others turning on me, and the dominant culture and social world seem perilous. I think that one is also kind of schizotypal, but also autistic, you know, because there's some of this, I don't know if I can properly articulate for autism spectrum disorder, because it's almost like my expectation is just having to put more effort into being cognizant of things in the social world, as though there's like a social deafness to me that I have to overcome on some things. So here's another one. I can go about my daily life in a head fog, or be so amped up that my life becomes an epic journey on a cosmic divine comedy. Now that one's definitely schizotypal. But I'm imagining a lot of people with autism, you know, like that just kind of feels like they fall off the track of the culture around them. And I think probably autistic people are at risk of this kind of detached space where they maybe are at risk of feeling like they're in a head fog. And if you feel mostly alienated from social worlds, whether it's deliberate or not, I feel like in the case of schizotypal, sometimes I suspect it's deliberate, you know, because of the lack of trust and being skeptical of others and the suspicious nature. But all right, let's get back on track here. The social world's complicated for these two disorders, and it really is fascinating to sort of imagine, you know, what makes up yourself as a social being and your reaction to the social world. And I think I'm neurodivergent, right? And I think probably a lot of schizotypal people are not neurotypical, but I kind of feel like there's almost a more emotional aspect to schizotypal, and you know, that maybe came from development, that makes it more like a personality disorder, not just something in your brain that's missing necessarily. Which I don't like saying that out loud. This feeling like something's missing in me. There's something missing in my brain. What is it? Something missing in my life. Those are the things you can torture yourself with, and I don't wish that on anybody. But I think that's part of the issues. You just feel like you're missing something, or you're just learning to live without certain things because the social world is perilous. So let's see here. And I just want to kind of give a little note on bipolar. I think one of the things, and I think this connects to schizotypal too, actually, is there's just something about when your feelings get all amped up that you can kind of sense your feelings scrambling your thoughts. I think that's the best way to put it. When you're in something like an episode, it doesn't matter if it's like amped up and manic or if it's like a depressive episode. You know, I think one of the valuable things here is to step back and consider, how are my feelings scrambling my thoughts? Whatever that is, I think it's like woven into this whole thing. You know, just step back, wait for your perspective to clear up, wait for the emotions to stop just trashing your ability to make the most responsible, wisest decision that you can live with. So I want to dwell on the loner part of this, because I feel like that's kind of the one that causes the most angst, you know, because I think a lot of people, they wonder if their introversion has gone too far, and it's not just introversion, and it's a really good way to look at it, you know, like introversion that goes so far that you're really detaching from things, and you're less living in the world and more living in your head, which I think is kind of a schizotypal thing. But I suspect a lot of autistic people are doing the same thing, you know, just living in their internal worlds, maybe to a lesser extent as schizotypal, but I don't know. There's one for you to search out in yourself. Why are you living in your head? Why do you get stuck in your head? Why is the social world so complicated? Why are you apprehensive about the social world? Is it autism? Or is it schizotypal? And I think one of the ways to clear this up is to kind of explore kind of the developmental part of this that causes some scars to your ability to trust, you know, because not every autistic person has attachment trauma, which some of this you might have to, I can go into attachment styles, but being autistic doesn't assume that you have an insecure attachment style. But if you're schizotypal, I imagine, you know, schizotypal, by the way, I'm not diagnosed borderline, so I was technically wrong in self-diagnosing that, but attachment trauma is so much a part of both that it's kind of like schizotypal kind of subsumes the borderline traits. And what I'm getting at here is, what am I getting at here? Here, look, ADHD going on right now. The thought just clean leaping out of my head. So we're going to go into the developmental side of this. And I think to kind of protect identities, I'm going to go through different characters. And some of these I'll intimately relate to, and some of these are more like things I see. I spend a lot of time on a subreddit. I want you to join us on Reddit at r/schizotypal. It's a really great place. Join us on there. I post quite a bit on there. I'm a moderator there right now, which is definitely fun. But so character 1. I think this is kind of a schizoid character, but there's a version of this that's like a mixture of schizotypal and schizoid, where the person was neglected as a child, and the world has just been unresponsive to them, and so that it's just like whatever emotional. I think that's where a lot of the flat emotions come from. They don't expect anything of the world, and the world isn't meeting their needs, so they detach from it, and they don't want to trust their feelings, They're not going to entrust their feelings to a world that's unresponsive to them. So they become more flat emotionally, and they deal with their emotions in their head, and sever themselves from the world. I think these disorders are kind of a mix of the Enneagram Type 5 and the Enneagram Type 4, and just Type 5 especially right here, which if you don't know about that, it's okay. Type 5s are like cerebral detached types who are so in their mental world that they'll even process emotions there. And I think that's a great way to describe schizoid and schizotypal. Now, here's another character. I think this one is, I kind of have some here's a hypothesis I have about where the developmental version of schizotypal can come from. I'm either talking about myself or somebody else, but there's a version of a person's youth for kind of anxious, introverted, sensitive children, or they don't have to be sensitive, so just a picture in your own youth. Maybe you're schizotypal, maybe you're not, you listening to this. I think some schizotypal people have a moment in their youth, if you really think about your development, when you're forming most, a lot of things are important, things are forming in your psychological profile, it's like you're building a healthy psychological state, like you're building a shield against the world, but also trying to form a healthy attachment to it. And if you can think back to your youth, there might be a moment where you might be said it out loud, maybe you said it multiple times. Maybe there was just one moment that you can remember where you basically swore off trusting people again because your boundaries got broken over and over and over. Maybe they're just you would feel good about yourself and your relationship with some important character, but then the disrespect would always come back, the betrayal would come back, and your boundaries would just get broken over and over and over. It'd just be this cycle where you just knew your feelings were going to get crushed eventually after feeling at the top of the world. And this character, it's like, on some level, your sense of trust just snaps. Like, I think some people want to internalize that lack of trust because it's safe, like just remove some of that to protect yourself. And maybe you didn't realize it, but sometimes I think when children are swearing off trust, like, I'm never trusting this person again, I think some of that gets baked into them in a way that lasts, and it's hard to start overcoming it, to learn to relearn trust and to set healthy boundaries and things that can be stable over a lifespan. Like, a lot of schizotypal people are alone, and some of them will say out loud, I don't want to be alone. I would love a lover. I'd love all these things, but they don't. And I think part of it is to deal with just a baked in lack of trust and wanting to be independent, because that's where you're safe. You're safe alone with your hobbies, your thoughts, your mental worlds, your video games, your movies, your books, your comics, your fantasies of yourself in this, because we all want to have some full sense of ourselves. And I think, depending on what your childhood is like, and if you're schizotypal, probably you're more imaginative type of person that's maybe more prone to being ruminative, flipping thoughts over and over in your mind, even to the point of being obsessive, which, by the way, OCDs can be comorbid with schizotypal. And paranoid personality disorder, by the way, which paranoia is kind of baked into the schizotypal pie. And it makes sense. It makes sense to just have just this default sort of suspiciousness because you trust yourself. And you can, I've loved all sorts of people, and I have good friends. And so it's the thing that's awkward about identifying as schizotypal is, you're kind of saying that you're not that close. You're not that comfortable being close with people, but that might not mean that you're not even skilled at it. I have friends that I love and family members that I love. I have a great relationship with my parents now, and so we'll put a bookmark on that for a second here. Here's maybe a third character that seems kind of schizotypal. Some people, everybody wants to feel special, which kind of sounds like we're building a case for narcissism, but think of maybe a less narcissistic way to just want to feel special and want everybody to feel special and everything to feel meaningful, like we are on some cosmic journey in a divine comedy. We are spiritual beings. Good and evil do exist, and the world is communicating with you, right? The idea is a reference thing. Things are communicating to me, and they're giving me lessons in this divine comedy, and on the more paranoid end of that is thinking, oh, that person, I hear somebody laughing. Good Lord, are they laughing at me? Maybe that's the first assumption. Or are they talking about me? Are they turning against me? They are, aren't they? That kind of thing. Schizotypal people do seem to just kind of be wary that other people are just going to up and turn on them. And it kind of makes sense considering one of those characters. The characters whose boundaries got broken so many times, they just give up emotionally on some level. And I don't know, overcoming that's just going to be, it's just complicated. Like I know on the schizotypal form, there's people who are married, they're not, it's not super common, but I think people pull it off. If you just set boundaries and find a compatible person who you can communicate with, communication and trust. Good Lord. There just has to be an epic, I just think there just has to be this epic journey of establishing a foundation of trust and communication. And that goes for everyone, but I think that goes extra for schizotypal. Let's see here. I'm getting pretty close to where we want to be. I think one of the goals here that I wanted to set in your mind is, labels are a lot of fun, but the trap here is you don't want to use them as an excuse, right? So if you're schizotypal, maybe you're a little bit more likely to be saying things that aren't always grounded completely in reality. Maybe you just get high on some idea and you're making conceptual leaps that are not completely, anchored in reality. And losing my train of thought. Sometimes when I lose my train of thought, I stop the video and I delete it and I start over. But now maybe I have incentive to leave these a little rough, because it's like, then you can see me just being like, my brain just sort of just ideas flying straight out of my head. And then I'm just lost at sea again. But just, there's a careful balance of taking responsibility for the way you are now and your behaviors, but also kind of forgiving scars from your development or natural quirkiness, or, you know, like autism is probably, autism is interesting because I assume it's more of a genetic thing, but I think there's plenty of people identifying with autism that it is like a developmental version of autism that happened to them emotionally, which makes it even murkier, right? You know, so it's like, okay, we need to take responsibility for some of this, but you know, and also just forgiving yourself and other people, because, you know, for example, your parents are people, and who knows, maybe there's moments when whatever's happening, and you know, maybe it's not even your parents, somebody tyrannized you in your development, and to somehow eventually come to terms with that, all the things going on, and you realize it left scars, but to kind of forgive some amount of that, so that you can have a good loving relationship with, you know, your friends, your family, your parents, and just to try to, like, how do you moving past your developmental scars. I think that's it's a complicated one. And just for people that are going to be going on their diagnosis journey, just a few things to note. You know, I think some people have a psychiatrist who would like to diagnose this, but they're not comfortable. They don't have the tools. So here's just a list of some tools. There's one test you can administer these to yourself. A professional needs to do it, but one's called MMPI-3. One's called MCMI-4. And those are good for personality disorders. There's one for ADHD that's CAARS, maybe it's pronounced CARS. There's one for Autism Spectrum Disorder that's GARS-3, GARS-3. Those are good options. And yeah, I think that is where we want to be. I'm finally diagnosed. And we just got to figure out being a satisfied loner. It takes a lot of work and creativity, and maybe in both directions, you know, because if you're isolated enough, you know, and it's just you and your thoughts betray you, you know, intrusive thoughts, you know, it's not clear to me if it's more bipolar or schizotypal to feel like your brain just kind of turns on you at some point in many days, and your brain just sort of attacking, just sort of shredding you to pieces for no reason. You know, like where does that come? I don't even have my own. It's like I'm addicted to taking myself apart and then building myself back up. But yep, I'm schizotypal. Join us on r/schizotypal. By the way, just to explain what's going on over here, I've said in the past in other videos that there's Maria Franz from Heilung. I think Heilung is a beautiful representation of schizotypal, since it's so fantastical, and, you know, it's got this kind of pagan esotericism, spirituality that's kind of got, you know, kind of countercultural. Like a lot of schizotypals are like, they have like this impulse to be countercultural. And it's just good to have such an emotionally expressive version of spirituality. And right next to her is Senua, who's usually right there. But Heilung's actually going to be performing music in the new Hellblade game, Senua's Saga. Senua's in psychosis all the time, so it feels like a good character to represent the schizophrenia spectrum, even though that's definitely schizophrenia. Senua is in psychosis always, and schizotypal not necessarily. You know, maybe your thoughts are a little scattery. You know, you don't necessarily have to even hear things. I'm in this weird position where you know, you might wonder, at what point is an intrusive thought a hallucination? I don't think you need to think about it that way. Even though schizophrenia people have distinct hallucinations that don't feel like an intrusive thought. I think intrusive thoughts are a part of this, and I don't always have an explanation for things I hear. Maybe I'll leave that story for another time. But and it took a long time for me to acknowledge how paranoia manifests in me. Because once you're an adult, you've already got so many ways you're masking and coping with things that you have. Like, one of the things, like with restricted affect and like kind of stiff way of socializing that schizotypal and probably autism has is like, I have this like amped up social character that I get into that's there's probably cortisol. I'm sure there's stress hormone inside of me for my amped up social self, but it is kind of like a version of masking. And of course, you're also trying to like, you'll have those little moments where your brain just attacks you with your suspicious moment, or what is it possible that what I just said is reprehensible in some way, and now I have to do damage control. There's just, I think that's part of it. Socializing can be exciting. I am amped up in a way that you could translate as anxiety or excitement, and I can't maintain that. But I think part of it is if socializing is that much work, then like an introvert, you get burnt out extra fast. Need to go back to being alone, back into your safe place, let the cortisol drain out. And of course, sometimes I find reason to be anxious just straight in straight solitude, but solitude is just a wonderful luxury. And it's kind of my kind of attitude about it, even though, I've said in the past, I don't know if I'll end up having a partner who lives with me or not. I don't know. I can't predict that. Can't predict it at all. But I don't know. There's something to be said for just being able to own a solitary lifestyle and not being depressed about it. To reframe your perspective into livening it up. And sometimes I think it includes stuff like this, finding ways to express yourself in the world. Going on forums, going on the internet, texting your friends about the game you're excited about, just having people who kind of introverted and open-minded enough that you can get to the point where you're expressing yourself and you're getting that social part of you fulfilled, even though you might be trying to bat it down and you'd rather not feel dependent on those things. But yeah, I think we're good. Hopefully enjoyed my diagnosis video. Hopefully that answers one of the questions about the loner side of this, which I think is especially touchy. And thank you very much. Talk to you later, friends. See ya.